City Council, as well as the petition for a minimum wage charter amendment. And the staff direction reads, number 1, directing the city attorney to prepare a legal opinion on the 2 citizen petition charter amendments on whether they are appropriate proposals for placement on the ballot under applicable law, and to draft ballot questions for the 2 proposed amendments. The 2 opinions shall be public opinions. The opinions and draft ballot questions shall be distributed to the council and made available to the public by no later than Thursday, July 28th, 2016. And item number 2, referring both petitions for charter amendments to the next regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole, scheduled for Wednesday, August 3rd, 2016 at 10 a.m. for review and recommendation for final action by the full City Council at its regular meeting on Friday, August 5th, 2016. So now I will see, is there any discussion on the staff direction? Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I'm certainly very supportive of the staff direction. I just wanted to congratulate the citizens group for the 17,902 signatures and for being deemed sufficient, but also to really thank the clerk's office for turning this over in record time. I confess that I was, at least record as far as I know, who's keeping records on those, but amazingly fast turnaround time. I was getting concerned that things would get delayed and we'd be bumped right up to the deadline of the end of, I think it's the 26th of August, to get things on the ballot. So I really appreciate this and these staff directions too, and the fact that you've called out both of the ballot initiatives, because I think I was not the only person in the city who was getting worried and concerned about the timing. So having this information available for everybody on July 28th, and then we're making a commitment now that we will bring it back to the council on Friday, August 5th for our decision, I think is an excellent timeline, given everything. And
Thank
congratulations and thanks to the clerk's office.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Any additional discussion or comment? I am not seeing any. So then on the staff direction in front of us, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that direction is approved. And we have our next steps. And thank you, everyone who is here for these items. All right. So and you're welcome to stay for our next presentation, but we have a second discussion item, which is a very major item for the city. It is a presentation regarding strategic workforce planning. I will note that, again, in light of the fact that we've had a couple of council members who had to leave early, and also the fact this is a very major presentation, our plan is to receive the full presentation, take some initial questions and comments, which I think we have time to do, and then we'll probably hold this presentation in this committee for final action on it next cycle, so that if there are additional questions, we can do that. So, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair Glidden and members of the Committee of the Whole. As we all know, one of the visions of the City of Minneapolis is to have a workforce that reflects the communities that we serve. In April 2015, a staff direction was given, and I am going to give an overview very briefly of the components of the staff direction. It included goals tied to meet the city departments were to develop a workforce planning process in collaboration with the HR department, and the 3 elements included goals tied to meet departmental workforce needs, opportunities to diversify the workforce, and engagement in human resource best practices, which would include the assessment of position descriptions to remove unnecessary barriers in hiring. I am pleased and excited to provide you with this update. First, we will share with you what we call our current state, which will give you a historical perspective of the city workforce enterprise over the last 6 years, which will set the stage to report on our current actions around the directive as well as our next steps. I will also be requesting the City Council, the Committee of the Whole approval of our enterprise workforce representation goals. At this time, I'd like to introduce Deb Kruger, who will tee this up. She is the recruiting manager, and she is going to provide you with the historical 6-year data of our city's workforce, enterprise workforce.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Chair Glidden and members of the committee. I'm going to walk through some of the graphs in the first 2 slides are going to represent a 6-year look back at the changes in the demographic makeup of the city's enterprise workforce as it relates to racial and gender diversity. And then later in the presentation, I'm going to do an update on where we've been in 2016, so moving us forward and into the future. That's going to highlight some of the strides that we've made to further increase the diversity of the city's staff in 2016. The top portion of the graph shows the 6-year period from the end of the year 2009 through the end of 2015. The percentage of employees of color at the city increased by 1.4%. resulting in 25.8% of the city's workforce comprised of employees of color at the end of 2015. And while a concerted effort between 2013 and 2015, where our stagnant hiring levels prior to that came back to a normal level, resulted in that time frame, 2013 to 2015, resulted in about a 10% increase in hiring of people of color, of new hires into the city. And despite those increases in hiring, they have been offset by employees of color leaving city employment. And then the charts on the bottom, the one on the left, bottom left, shows that 1.4 employees were people of color at the end of 2015. And on the right of the employees of color at the city, the majority of the self-reported ethnicity makeup is Black or African American. Well, we see a different picture when we look at the female makeup of the city's workforce. There has been a steady decline in female representation over the past 6 years, which has resulted in an overall decrease of 2.1% in the number of female employees working at the city. This decrease is mainly attributable to the percentage of females leaving the city, which has been outweighing the efforts made in hiring. And what we've seen is that we've increased our hires of people of color and females over the past several years. But the one other factor that has a great impact on the overall makeup of the city's workforce is separations, those that are leaving the city for various reasons. So let's take a closer look at some of our separation data. So a closer look at separations for our employees of color, for me, had 2 big reveals. One is that 69% of employees of color left the city for reasons other than retirement, as compared to 49% of white employees leaving the city for reasons other than retirement. That would be resignations or terminations, for instance. And on average, nearly a third of our employees of color left the organization within their first 3 years of hire. And then taking a closer look at the separations of our female employees, revealed on those 2 same data points, 62% of women left city employment for reasons other than retirement, as compared to 48% of male employees. And on average, 41% of our female employees are leaving within their first 3 years of employment at the city. In analyzing workforce data and trends for the last 6 years, it clearly indicates that strategies need to focus on both hiring and retention, as hiring alone is not the single solution for increasing the representation of people of color and females in our workforce. Research from Cornell University shows that having diversity within the senior management level positively impacts hiring and retention of people of color and females in an organization. So I wanted to give you a look at the demographic makeup of the city's leadership group. So the city's leadership is instrumental in driving systematic change in equal employment in a sustained manner. Ooh, got a little close. Looking at the makeup of the city leadership over the past 3 years, on the left-hand side, you'll see for department heads who are people of color has increased from 18% to 26%. And people of color in the appointed positions, which would be anyone in a leadership group throughout the 22 departments, excluding department heads and politically appointed, has decreased about 5% over the last 3 years. And then looking at that same slice of data for city employees that at city leadership that are female, the percentage of department heads who are female has remained fairly steady at about 36%, and appointed leaders who are female has also remained pretty steady at about 46%. So in addition to analyzing workforce data to identify both strengths and opportunities in recruitment, hiring, engagement, retention, Human Resources has began conducting workforce planning pilots, and I'm going to turn it back over to Patience Ferguson, who will give you an update on that process.
So we felt it was important to get a strong overview in looking at the trends and the data regarding our workforce in the city of Minneapolis. And as Ms. Kruger mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the pilots that we worked on over the last year. From those workforce pilots, we've learned a few things. Number one is that data is very important to be able to drive decision-making regarding our enterprise workforce. Number two, we've also learned that each department has different needs that require different solutions. A one-size-fits-all approach is not effective. Number three, we also need a simplified and aggressive approach to workforce planning. And number four, which I think is critical, we need clearly defined goals, even if they're aspirational, and to also report back on measurable progress toward the defined goals. And lastly, the data indicates that we need to not only look at our hiring, but we also need to look at the development of retention strategies for the city enterprise. Moving forward, we are working very diligently on the development of equal employment opportunity work plans. And the information in those work plans will include the following: the greater information on the relevant greater metro area markets, as well as the Minneapolis labor markets. Beginning this month in July, we will be meeting with departments with regard to their equal employment planning process in collaboration with the departments, and they will get the data that they need to really help them focus on the goals that are relevant to their particular departments. The goals will be established that align with the city goals, with the focus on employee development, which primarily is the best way to engage employees. So going back to looking at the importance of establishing goals, one thing I want to emphasize and really reinforce is the importance of having a sustained effort in working toward the goals that we're setting. With that in mind, what will it take to have a workforce that's reflective of the community that we serve, which is some of the values that we espouse as the city? Number one, the development of representation goals for women and people of color. What we've done is we have conducted scenario planning, and we've factored a few points around that. Number one is 10% overall. These are the assumptions: a 10% overall workforce vacancy rate, an increased hiring of people of color to 40%, a reduction in turnover of people of color to no higher than 6%, and an increase over the course of the years in hiring of 2% per year. This requires a long-term sustainable effort. But we believe that it's something that we can do as a department, we can do as an organization, and we can do as a city. And we have set a goal of reaching this goal by 2022. The second one, again, what will it take for women? 45% representation by 2022. And the following assumptions that we're making is a 10% overall workforce vacancy rate, an increase of hiring of females, women to 45%, and reduction on turnover of females to no higher than 7%, and an increase of 2.5% of hiring per year. So, those are the numbers. But it takes more than hiring. It also takes a concerted effort with regard to retention. So we believe that in order to reach these very ambitious yet aspirational goals, it's going to take a multifaceted approach and multifaceted efforts in the following areas: leadership, recruitment and selection, engagement and retention, performance management, data analysis and metrics, and policies and practices. So just a brief summarization of what that means by leadership. We believe that as leaders of the enterprise, it's our responsibility to really continue to set that tone of urgency and importance of moving this work ahead. We believe that part of our role is to encourage behaviors that are inclusive, to set goals and help to support those goals, and to really sponsor the efforts that need to happen within the city. We also believe that it's important to develop tracking and quarterly reporting tools and to really set that expectation. And we believe one of the best ways to do that is through the annual Enterprise Equal Employment Opportunity Plan, setting that plan, and also reporting measured progress against that plan. Again, what will it take? It's also taking, and just to let you know that we've already done some of the work in this area around position reviews. We have developed as an HR department a position review process. We have ongoing efforts to review position descriptions to ensure that they accurately reflect the duties being performed and the qualifications needed to do the work. We have worked to eliminate barriers, artificial barriers, by incorporating equivalency statements and language requirements where appropriate, and cultural intelligent competencies across all of those positions. That's only one step. The next step is around performance management. So we believe that performance management helps to level set the accountability for all employees. So in 2017, we will be adding an intercultural competence success factor when we roll out the 2017 performance appraisal cycle. And also we have, as we've mentioned before, developed a structured process for departments to report back on their equal employment opportunity plans. And lastly, we're looking at, and we've already started working on, the development of refined target recruitment efforts which align to the equal employment opportunity plans. We recognize that every department is unique, and so by doing this, we hope to further support and work with our colleagues to really help these efforts take even more of a meaning. Lastly, what will it take? Robust retention strategies promoting a culture of respect and inclusion. What does that mean? We've already this year rolled out, and I'm very happy to report that we have rolled out some additional training for our hiring managers that has been extremely, extremely well received around unconscious bias in the hiring process. First of all, we started with our own staff, and 100% of our HR employees have undergone training in 2015. Right now, we stand at 125 managers, hiring managers that have gone through the unconscious bias training and hiring, and it has been well received. As a matter of fact, it's so well received that we have waiting lists for people who want to get into, really learn more about how they can reduce bias in the hiring process. We are also rolling out by September of this year mandatory training for panel members so that they can understand what their role is in reducing and minimizing bias in the hiring and selection process. And then lastly, as we talk about a culture of respect and inclusion, we're working to remove barriers to the timely reporting of separations. One of the challenges, quite frankly, has been that we didn't have the internal capacity to do this work in terms of looking at timely separations. In many cases, it was taking us almost 2 months to get this information back, but that was pre-Comet. So now that we have undergone the Comet upgrade, we will have the opportunity and we'll have the capability to be able to get separation data at a much faster rate. We also will have the ability to track and analyze exit interviews. We've also working on putting a process to also look at the grievance procedures as well as the discrimination claims. And then to create a review process that we can circle back to the departments and give them this data so that they, again, have opportunities to figure out what they need to do to really create even more of a welcoming and inclusive workforce. We've also expanded the training. We did a pilot this year, earlier this year, on managing diverse workforce that was well received. And our plan is to roll that out to even more supervisors. We've also, with our engagement survey, we have relooked at how we're doing the engagement survey, and we went with a vendor that could give us much more robust capabilities to really dig deeper to find out, even by different groups, why people are engaged, why they're not engaged, and we can integrate that data into the work with the departments. And lastly, we're also working to provide even more training for our leaders. Two more areas which I think we've been talking a little bit about during the presentation is continuing to look at the data, continuing to look at what the data is telling us, continue to analyze that data. And so we will be working on, and we already are working on, dashboards so that we can give quarterly reports back to the department heads in terms of what the efforts are looking like. And how I liken this is that just how we have a financial reporting mechanism and we look at how we're spending our resources from a financial perspective, my vision around this is we have the same intent to do the same with our human capital. So we know all the time what's going on with our workforce. And we are already working to add some additional capabilities of that, which we anticipate will be rolled out by the end of the year. The last part, which we've heard a little bit about today, is around policies and practices. We've been working in this past year to refine many policies and practices that can help support our vision of having a workforce that reflects the community. Earlier this year, we revised our Civil Service Commission rules. We also, thanks to your approval, we approved a performance appraisal review policy. Earlier today, we heard some conversations around the Rule of Three. And then we also approved a salary administration plan. So we're making some very strong efforts in terms of looking at changing any policies and practices that will really help move the dial as it pertains to reflecting a community that we serve. But beyond that, we've also looked at some other kinds of things that we would really want to do that are around, particularly as Deb shared earlier, with why people are leaving. Some of our people are leaving in 3 years, early in 3 years. So we have already increased our onboarding efforts, starting with appointeds. We now have a very robust onboarding process for our appointed leaders. We're now working to roll that out for our new supervisors so that everybody's on the same page, that everybody understands what does it mean to be a representative of the city of Minneapolis? What does it mean to say that we're one Minneapolis? What does it mean to say that we have an equitable workplace? It's been my experience that people decide whether or not they're going to leave in the first 90 days. And if we can get our leaders, our supervisors, our appointeds to be on the same page and then give them the tools that they need to be successful, that helps everyone, our employees, it helps the city, it helps the residents, it helps everyone. We also are looking to implement employee resource groups, which can support employees, particularly those in the early tenure with the city. Develop a mentoring program. Now, these are ideas. We are looking to do those, and these are things we want to do, is to develop a robust mentoring program to target it to people of color and women, and then continue to report back on the data, continue to do that, because I think the more that we do that, the more we'll understand what we need to do. I want to also say, going off script a bit, that I am very excited. I've been in human resources for many, many years. And I can honestly say in my work as head of HR in various organizations, I am so impressed with the commitment from the city council, from my colleagues, my department head colleagues and employees to really make this a better place to work. And so I think that the things that we are working on, the things that we're continuing to work on, will not only help the city as an enterprise, but more importantly, I think it helps the residents and it helps us to help other organizations who are looking to move the dial on equity. I'm excited for the momentum that the work has been generated toward the enterprise. I look forward to building on this momentum. I thank you so much for your support of the city's workforce. We're asking for your continuing support. We have a goal that I'd like to at least share with you today. And what our goal is we would ask for the city council to approve the workforce representation goals of 41% of the city's workforce as people of color by 2022, and 45% of the city's workforce would be of women by 2022. This concludes our presentation, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Let's start with Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, and I have some questions, but I'm also very excited to see this coming forward, especially these goals. I think it's been a long time in coming. I remember when I first got on the council and heard about our affirmative action plan and kept hearing about our goals should just be tied to the market share of qualified employees in the region. And I think as policymakers, we kept wondering, well, we need to actually tie that to the makeup of the people who live here. So we need a long-term goal, and then all participate together. So that's just fantastic, and it's very exciting seeing all the work that's going on in here. I think this also grew out of the resolution we passed in 2012, where we wanted to be a lead by example in terms of equity and employment in the city, and I really appreciate going forward. I have to say the first few slides were some pretty bad news. And partly I wished, well, why weren't we getting more information and quarterly annual reports so we saw what was happening? Very curious about why 30% of people of color are being separated or whatever, the separations, whereas it's 18%. So I know maybe we haven't drilled down in all of that, but I'm immediately curious how many chose to leave, how many are layoffs, what does that mean? I do have if there are more details, we could hear that, but I know our meeting's running long and I have lots of questions. But is separation the same as turnover? Because later in the presentation, you talked about turnover. Is there some term of art where I should know what the difference is? Is turnover that when somebody chooses to leave?
It really is the same. When we talk about separations rates, we're taking of all of the separations, anybody leaving the city for any reason, just for that 1 year, and then what slice of that total pie were, for instance, female or people of color. Turnover, we're taking, doing a comparative, head count at the end of 1 year versus the beginning of the next year, and then what's the average between that within that one particular group.
Okay, so it's more general.
Yeah, so it's a little different, but yeah, same thing. It's people leaving the city.
Do we know any idea why there's so many separations in the first 3 years for women and people of color? Do we do exit interviews or get any more information about that?
Within the first 3 years, I mean, clearly, if there are terminations or probationary release, those obviously happen within your probationary period, which is the first year, and that for people of color, that's about 15% of the separations, and for females, that's about 13%. But roughly about 50% for both groups, a little bit more than 50% are simply resignations. And that is where we're building up. We do exit interviews now. We don't have a robust system in place currently at the moment to be able to pull out and analyze data on an enterprise level. Right now it's done, by the generalists in each department. So we are getting to that, because that's absolutely important in order to be able to drive the correct strategies.
And so you shared a lot of data for citywide employees. Do we have similar charts, or could we generate similar data on a department by department basis? Are some departments bucking the trend, or however that is? Is that available?
We do. We do have department data, and they will be shared with departments. We're rolling out the department plans for their Equal Employment Opportunity Report beginning next week. And so departments will be getting all of that data, as well as recommended actions on how to move on moving forward to increase representation in their departments.
So I think it could be very helpful if that information was also shared with policymakers and with the general public. I know you also talked about quarterly reports, so hopefully those will be available online so we can all see that. We can all hold ourselves accountable and ask the public to help hold us accountable and understand that and look at that and celebrate when we're making progress and when we aren't. So I think that's going to be critically important. And so please don't keep us in the dark, but I think we have to, of course, once you share something with us policymakers, it's public information. But
Absolutely.
and that's
appreciate
what
it.
I want it to be. So hopefully we can do that forward, or you can at least hear that I think that's important. If whatever personnel information, and I think in aggregate on a whole department basis, of course we can share that. Thank you very much, and thanks for all your work on this and the great report.
Thank you. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, I just want to say that I really appreciate the work that you've spent trying to move this conversation forward, and I really welcome the goals that have been stated here. I think it's important to keep our eyes on the census information that we will continue to get every 10 years here, because it's my understanding that the diverse populations of the Twin Cities metro area are the ones that are going to be driving the growth, the future growth of our city and our region. And so making sure that that 41% goal continues to grow as our diverse population also continues to grow. Oftentimes, I remember our former mayor, R.T. Ryback's discussion of the silver tsunami and the fact that Minnesota in general is a baby boomer state. So just really being aware and conscious of those patterns that will continue to shift and change with time. I do have a question about sort of the ongoing training around cultural sensitivity for our employees. And I'm aware of Minneapolis Police Department's implicit bias project or initiative. I haven't seen the curriculum and I haven't participated in that specific training, so I don't have opinions about whether or not that implicit bias training is meaningful. But I recently ran into a situation where I think some city employees were trying to honor and celebrate Cinco de Mayo by having some kind of a food contest and whatnot. And so my question is just around how are we training our diverse workforce and our more traditional workforce around issues of cultural sensitivity, racial equity, racial justice, kind of those conversations, because I'm not aware of how we're handling that discussion.
Council Member Cano, members of the committee, Council Chair Glidden. Right now, what we focused on, and let me just say this, at any time, if you would like to attend, and I offer this to all council members, if you would like to attend any of the trainings that we're offering, we're more than willing to make those available to you. Our first priority has been around unconscious bias, and so I'm actually going to be attending a session tomorrow, and it's really focused on what the research says around unconscious bias. And it also gives people the opportunity to identify their own unconscious bias and to come up with action plans. And so that's been a huge priority for us from a hiring perspective. We also have, I know that the Office of Equity and Inclusion also offers trainings that they post on the City Talk. And it's more around their 90-minute sessions that are open. And so those started toward the middle of this year, and they include a variety of topics. So those are some dialogues and trainings that are also occurring with the city employees. And as far as I'm concerned, they've been well attended. I'm looking at Nuria, because that's under the Office of Equity and Inclusion. So it's a multi-pronged approach. I know that earlier this year, there was also an event that was held at the library that was done by Breaking Ice Theater that was open to all city employees. And so there have been a multi-efforts, multi-approaches, not just one way, and all of these are things that employees can avail themselves to. There are also opportunities for them if they are not able to attend that session, they can also preview those sessions online.
So just to be clear, these are all voluntary.
These are all voluntary, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm not seeing further questions. I had maybe just a couple comments, and then I think our hope is that we're going to postpone this in committee so we can finish the conversation on this very important presentation. But I actually have a follow-up question on Councilmember Kano's request for more information about how the enterprise is looking at implicit bias training. And I guess I was under the impression that we were looking at how we would be able to provide this training enterprise-wide. And so, and I think that's essentially kind of what she was asking is what is happening today. But so I didn't hear that in your answer. I heard about these programs, which I think are important. And again, the programming right now through the Office of Equity and Inclusion, it is a great opportunity, but it's different than saying we're having a systematic program to ask employees to, as part of the requirement of being an employee, to have this training, whatever it should be, and kind of put that into just what are part of the expectations as the enterprise. So, what's your understanding on kind of what direction we're moving on this item?
I will clarify that, Council Chair Glidden, members of the committee. We have also included that as part of our 2017 budget around unconscious bias for employees. And so our goal is to create our own curriculum. So there will be some investment in the curriculum. How we work is we test it, but then once we ask for the one-time allocation, it's our hopes that this is something that we in the enterprise can do. So we have included that in our 2017 budget.
Thank you. And I guess maybe kind of as a last comment, I wanted to follow up on, I think there were some revelations in this presentation in part around the retention issues, and which is a very serious issue. I will say kind of anecdotally, I had heard about this for some time, but had not seen it just in a data picture. What did that actually look like? And the other thing I'll just say that's concerning about that is, I think just trying to understand how long will it take for us to get a handle on the causes so that then we can put in place the right kind of programming to address what that, whatever are those buckets of reasons. And so I appreciate that you do have some strategies right now that you're going to think about instituting, including the employee resource teams, the mentoring program, and I'm not looking at that slide, so I'm not remembering all the items on the list. But and maybe there is a picture you're already starting to see by looking down into department level data or looking into position areas to see, is there a story to be told that gives more information? I guess there is a story just to be told around seeing that this is happening in a certain time frame within the first 3 to 5 years that an employee is with the city of Minneapolis. So I just wanted to reiterate also that this is kind of addressing this or understanding it more, and what the city is not doing right and what we need to do better is fundamental to your assumptions, meeting your assumptions, which are about meeting these broader goals that we would hope to meet by 2022. So,
Council Chair Glidden, members of the committee, we are working, as mentioned earlier, part of the challenge for us is having the system in place to support what we're trying to do. And so what we are doing with the data and the process, if you will, the technology process, is we're hoping to have this system up and running through the common system by no later than September of this year, which will give us the robustness that we need to act more quickly on when people are separating, because that's one of the challenges, is getting the information. So in talking with Teresa Nisler, who's our HR Technology Solutions Director, she's actually working with IT to make sure that that happens. And then the second part of that is then putting that system in place to be able to dig deeper down and get that data. And so our plan is to have that up and running by fourth quarter of this year. We are not waiting on any of that. So that is our intent.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, and I'm assuming you don't need any direction to continue moving forward with this work. when we were talking about optional training, I did notice on, I forget what page it is now, I think it was page 16, that you talked about a mandatory unconscious bias training for hiring panel members to roll out in September. So I just wanted to call people's attention
Yes,
to that.
thank you for reminding. Yes, that will be, because those are the individuals who help to select the people who make decisions. And so that will be rolled out under the leadership of Marilyn Talarico, and her unit will be, she's taking the lead on that.
Okay. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was kind of took myself out of queue only because I think you asked a couple of the questions. I thought it was very revealing about the separations and the hole in the bucket, if you will, that happens when you invest all of your effort in hiring people, but we can't retain them. And that creates a mathematical paradox that you're going to have to redouble your hiring practices to keep up with that. And it's almost like the more you hire, the more you're going to lose, and the further behind you get. So I think it's really important that you're approaching this from a very data-driven perspective. So I really appreciate the department, and in particular, you, Ms. Ferguson, leading this effort. It's been terrific. But Councilmember Glidden deserves a lot of credit to keeping this on our agenda and on our focus for the department goals as originally set up in that staff direction. So thank you, Council Vice President, for keeping this alive and moving forward. They're very ambitious goals, and but I think they're incremental. So you'll be able to, especially with the development of, incorporating the data from the COMET system and developing these dashboards, you'll be able to see the points of success and the points of concern that we'll be able to take direct action on. And I really appreciate the fact you're spending so much time with the departments on the hiring practices and on the retention. They're very different strategies, very different focuses in training and awareness. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've heard from departments as they're trying to hire, just hire in general, not just to achieve demographic goals or performance goals, just hire. It's really hard to hire people within our system. It takes a long time. How do we get qualified? So we have real policy changes in the works to help make that easier, to have a qualified pool of candidates to look at and screen them and get them in front of hiring managers faster. And I think that helps us get people on board faster, and that will help in our retention strategies because they'll be a more satisfied employee. They'll understand our process. They'll be supported. And I look forward to great success on both things. They're very ambitious goals, so I applaud ambitious goal setting, but I really appreciate the fact that they're putting strategies in place along the way to say we're on the right track and where we need additional investment. So thank you for all of your work.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have said. I think this is a great discussion. One additional thing I wanted to follow up on was recruitment of candidates. I think in particular in professions where women and people of color are underrepresented kind of overall, and how we can all work together to be more intentional about making sure we get diverse candidate pools, and we're kind of using every resource available to find those candidates. And I think folks reach out to me every once in a while from across the country interested in coming to Minneapolis. And I think we're gaining a reputation for a city that's a good employer, and in particular, one that's committed to racial equity. And I think that's something we can sort of capitalize on and start to build on that, all those recruitment strategies that are already being used. So I appreciate it a lot.
So with that, I'm not seeing further questions for now. We probably need to turn to committee reports so we can finalize this meeting. So I'm going to move to postpone this in committee one cycle. Discussion on that. Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you so very much for being here and all the work that your team has done, Ms. Ferguson. So we will now turn to committee reports, and I would ask committees to maybe take the summary approach in highlighting most significant items just in light of the time. First, Audit Committee with Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, our Independent Audit Committee met, and we have 3 items to submit to Council. The first is CPED's Loan Lifecycle Management Audit Report, just referring it to Council just so that you see it, and directing staff to refer the mayor the report for considerations in the upcoming budget process. The second is the IT Program and Project Management Office Review Memo, referring to the IT Program and PMO Review Memo. The third refers the City council the PeopleSoft web portal security internal audit report, which was received in closed session yesterday. It also recommends that City Council move forward with a staff direction to our city coordinator to help coordinate follow-up on termination procedures for our city enterprise and to work on web portal considerations mindful of the following departments: IT, HR, and finance and payroll. I'm happy to answer any questions. All right, not seeing any questions. Community Development and Regulatory Services with its chair, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We'll have 11 items on Friday. 4 of them are land sales, a couple of them are license revocations, and the rest are the regular gambling, business, and liquor license applications.
All right, thank you for that. Next, we have Health, Environment, and Community Engagement. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We'll be bringing forward 10 items on Friday. The first 3 are appointments. The first one is some approving appointments to the Neighborhood Community Engagement Commission. The second is an appointment to the Food Council. And the third is a mayoral appointment to the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. And our fourth item is approving the One Minneapolis Fund. People can look over those on the agenda. But that's a total $182,000 for the 2016 program. The fifth is some staff directions, asking staff to look at waste tires being used as ground cover in the city, as well as our advisory committees. The sixth item is a response to the neighborhood programming and support audit, where we're directing staff to continue the work about the future of supporting our neighborhoods and report back to the committee. We're looking at merging our NRP policy board with the commission as one of the recommendations, and we're also looking at what are our funding options, or we're asking staff to look at what are the funding options for neighborhood organizations after 2020. Then we have the rest of the items are also going to Ways and Means and have to do with the grants, donations, and a contract.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have Public Safety, Civil Rights, Emergency Management with Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We will have 5 items for approval on Friday. 1 is a funding increase for the Urban Scholars Program. 2 is a contract with Great Lakes Region for a federal building for MFD. Another is just accepting a grant from Centerpoint. An extension of a contract for MPHA for number 4, and number 5 is a grant amendment with the Minnesota Department of Homeland Security for Police Bomb Unit readiness.
All right, thank you. Transportation and Public Works with its Vice Chair, Councilmember Palmisano. Thank you, Madam Chair. There were several items in TPW, 4 of which did not go to Ways and Means. The first and most significant is the appointment of Robin Hutchison for our Director of Public Works for a 2-year term starting January 2016. The second is a small modification for clarity to our traffic control oversight ordinance. Third is designating the location and improvements for West 29th Street lighting project and setting the public hearing. The fourth is the 42nd Avenue North Street reconstruction layout approval variance and easements. The rest were all referred to Ways and Means. Happy to answer any questions. All right. Next, we have Ways and Means with Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Ways and Means will have 14 items for your consideration on Friday, the bulk of which are typical kind of gift acceptances, grant acceptances, and legal settlements. I do want to highlight that we have a lease for the Police Department Command Center, 511 building. That's item number 5 on our agenda. And also wanted to note we've accepted a series of several low bids for the citywide camera surveillance system maintenance and service. And that's worth pointing out, as well as the new appointed position of Deputy Chief Finance Officer, and 2 collective bargaining agreements will be in front of us for Friday. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And finally, we have Zoning and Planning with Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 11 items from Zoning and Planning. The first 5 items are related to right-of-way vacations requested by the University of Minnesota. The first 2 are recommended for denial. That was the action taken in Zoning and Planning, and the other 3 for approval. Item number 6 is a rezoning at 600 Washington Avenue Southeast to allow for a mixed-use building, which has a little over 400 new residential dwelling units and some commercial space. Item number 7 is amending the zoning code to update our regulations of lot area for two-family dwellings in the R2 zoning districts. Item number 8 is referring to staff and ordinance related to fraternities and sororities in our zoning code. Item number 9 is referring to staff updates regarding advertising signs and billboards. Item number 10 is referring to staff an update to our accessory dwelling unit ordinance brought forward by staff. And item number 11 is referring to staff and ordinance, which is a rezoning study for the Lowry Hill East neighborhood. Can't answer any questions.
All right. So with that, I believe we have concluded with our agenda for today. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.